Bedwars has saved the Hive. I never thought I'd say it either, but here we are. If you look at most games and their player counts, you see low sets of 100, sometimes 500, sometimes 100, usually anything in between. Those are usually the lesser popular games. The more popular game, we're talking mid-thousands. Could be 3,000, 4,000, 5,000 even, but Bedwars is 12,000 for some reason. So, what exactly happened here? What made that work? At the end of March and beginning of April, we all saw the same thing, right? We saw a great game, Treasure Wars, be replaced by something that was lukewarm at best. How could we be led to believe that this would be the game that would add so much popularity to the Hive again? What's stunning to me is that the player count of 2024 is comparable to the player counts of 2020, in the middle of a situation where all kids had to stay home from school, slack off on their education way more than they'd like to admit, and play video games instead. We're not forced to be indoors the way we were back then, so that means a lot of people are willingly playing the Hive. And furthermore, more than a third of them are playing Bedwars. What is this game doing that is so gratifying to players? Hive can add a new game, but Gravity's popularity didn't last very long, nor did Block Parties. Why is this so different? If you guessed that Bed Wars was the closest thing we had to a casual PvP game, you'd be correct. In Treasure Wars, the game was super fast-paced, which meant that offense was everything. If somebody played defense, you could safely assume they didn't know what they were doing. And that's because defense isn't viable in Treasure Wars. It never really was. You might be able to prolong your death a little bit, but at the end of the day, somebody who has greater offense than you will succeed sooner or later. At the end of the day, Bed Wars did manage to at least come close to perfecting a healthy balance between defense and offense. Even if you can argue offense is slightly better, playing defensively doesn't put you at much of a hindrance if you know what you're doing. This chart here is something I compiled up. I decided to try ruling out the hybrids, the offensive and defensive items. You can see that one's not particularly more prevalent than the other. Yes, there is some offensive-based items you can use to get the jump on your opponents, but you have enough hybrid and defensive items that if you play either offensively or defensively, you have a fair shot to prolong the game. One playstyle doesn't necessarily excel over the other. Is offensive usually the more preferred playstyle? In most cases, yes, but you're not really punished for playing defensively. And playing offensively at a faster pace isn't automatically going to get you the win, much like playing defensively, slow but careful, isn't going to guarantee you a win either. There's a fine line between both. You oftentimes have to sort of shift around. That is probably the mechanism that keeps casuals invested in the game. It's the fact that they can play defensively against the hyper-aggressive players and still last a while, can outlive many players, and likely place top 3 if they're playing solo. The point is, defense is a viable option in Bed Wars, whereas with Treasure Wars, it was not. If you played a duos game where one player was in fact offensive and the other one was defensive, it could work. You could probably win the game if you know what you're doing. Both players would be able to contribute at least close to an equal amount of use on their team, and that's what matters. Bed Wars still has its flaws. It's still a game that has a lot of things it can improve. I still think that from my statement from last video regarding its pacing, it could be better. But it does a fine job of making sure that both types of players, and any players in between, do have a fair chance of excelling in their game in their own unique ways. Bed Wars has a bit of a unique effect on the Hive. See, Treasure Wars was great for the intermediate and even more so the advanced players because taking advantage of that super fast-paced game was what we loved doing. Destroying everybody in your path is a very fun feeling, and being able to destroy 6 out of 7 of your neighbor's beds in a mushroom match on solo was always fun. The only problem with that is, as we explored upon, it alienated the casual players because everybody was just too fast and too powerful to be kept up with. And so, we gave the intermediate and advanced players a hell of a time sometimes, but we made the casual players go through a living hell most of their time on the game. So rightfully so, they were alienated and didn't want to play the game. Now, in Bed Wars, we sacrifice a little bit of that quality for the advanced players and a little less so the intermediate players. Hive presented us a question. Would you rather have a 9, maybe 10 out of 10 experience for the best of the best players, or we reduce it to like a 7 or 8, but everybody enjoys it to that same capacity. We obviously know now, talking about Bedwars' player count, which of the two was the better choice. And while I do like Treasure Wars a little more, I will admit that, at the end of the day, I am happy that Bedwars is here, and I can still enjoy it, even if it's not my favorite game of all time. So, I guess in essence, Hive was right. It was better for business. Because while it wasn't better for everybody, at least we got a higher amount of people enjoying the game to some degree.